Hello, I'm Jerry Stewart. Normally, when you come to this podcast site, I'm talking about common sense, just thinking through commonsensical things to do, and how today in our country, people aren't acting very commonsensical. Well, today I would like to tell you a story, and it has to do with this idea of a divine appointment. Now you say, what's a divine appointment? Well, I'm in an occupation where people make appointments to speak to me. I give them advice on accounting matters, tax matters, do work for them, and they call me up, set an appointment time, and we know we're going to meet, and we meet. So those appointments are pretty easy to follow. But this idea of a divine appointment, well, that's when God arranges something that you're not aware of until it comes. Let me tell you a story. When I was about 25 years old, I was going to college, and I lived in Arlington, and that's a city outside of the city of Fort Worth, but I worked in Fort Worth. And every day I would finish my work and I would go back home. Well, there had been something going on in our area that people were picking up hitchhikers, and it wasn't going well. One man had even been killed by a hitchhiker. Well, I had this problem that I would give hitchhikers rides. If somebody needed to get somewhere and I had a car and I was driving that direction, why not give them a ride? Well, the word was put out by the police department, don't pick up hitchhikers. It's way too dangerous. Don't pick up hitchhikers. Well, I had made up my mind that I was not going to pick up any hitchhikers. Now, here it was a Friday and the end of the week, and it was, late into the afternoon, and I was driving home. So as I'm driving home, I'm listening to a little bit of the radio and such. And as I drive down this road, all of a sudden, I see this man on the side of the road. And he had his thumb out. Now, immediately I noticed, kind of scoped him out. First of all, he was a very big man. He looked very big, standing on the side of the road. He was dressed in pretty shabby clothing. It was kind of cool. It was in the winter, and he wasn't really wearing a very warm jacket. He had no luggage, nothing with him, and he was a black man. And I kind of looked at him, and I remember thinking, "Ooh, even if I was picking up hitchhikers, I'm not sure I'd pick up this guy because he looked a little scary." Well, I remember driving past him and saying, I'm not going to pick up the hitchhiker. I'm going to take the police's advice, and I'm going to go on by. And I remember I went by. There was no incident. He didn't look at me. I didn't look at him. And I got maybe about a half a block away, and heard this voice in my head. And the voice in my head said, go pick up that hitchhiker. And I remember saying, what? Am I talking to myself? What's the deal? I'm not going to go pick up a hitchhiker. It's not safe. He looks like he could be dangerous. I don't think I'm going to do this. I drove about another block, and the voice came again. Jerry, go pick up that hitchhiker. And I remember saying, Lord, is that you? And I realized that I was being spoken to in my mind by the Lord. And so I took another couple of seconds and said, wow, I guess I better follow the Lord's calling and go pick up this big, shabby man on the side of the road. Well, I turned around, went back, and I pulled over, and I said, "Where are you going?" He said, "I'm going to Dallas," which is about 30 miles beyond where I was going. And I said, "Well, I'm not going all the way to Dallas, but I'll give you a ride as far as I can." He said, "Great." And when he got into my car, it was confirmed he was a very large man, because when he got into my car kind of took a little bit of a dip to the right when he sat down. He was heavy. He was a big man. And the first thing that I noticed was that he had a very strong odor. When he sat down, his head almost went to the top of the inside of my car. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, God laid on my heart to pick this man up, but what's going to happen? Well, we started driving down the road, and he turned to me and he said, "God told you to pick me up, didn't he?" And I looked at him. He said, "Yeah, God told you to pick me up, didn't he?" And I said, "Well, yeah." And he went, "Yoo-hoo-hoo, yeah." He said, "I was standing on the side of the road trying to get a ride, and I just started praying, God, send somebody to pick me up and give me a ride." I can tell you goosebumps went up and down me, and my hair on the back of my neck stood up, and I'm just like, wow. And then I thought, is this guy like an angel or what? What's going on? Well, I knew there was a reason why God wanted me to pick him up, so, well, I waited to hear the story. That's when he told me that he was on his way to Dallas to get back to his family, and that he only had until dark that night. He only had until dark that night. And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, he had done some really, really foolish things, and he had told his wife he never wanted to see her again, and he stomped out of his house and he hit the road. And he said he had ideas that he was going to travel far east. He was going to find a new life. He was sick and tired of his wife and kids. He was sick and tired of the responsibility. He just wanted to be through with the whole thing. And he said he really wasn't very nice about it. He just stomped off. Well, he told me that the main way he did his transportation was by rail car. He would catch a train going by and hitch a ride. Well, he told me that 2 days before, he had been trying to jump onto a train, and that when he jumped onto the train, he slipped and fell off and hit his head and landed on the tracks, and it knocked him out. And he looked at me and said, "You know, trains going up and down that track all the time." And there I was, knocked out on the track. Well, he said that when he awoke, there was a train that had just gone down the track, and the shaking of the rails and the sound woke him up. And he said he immediately rolled off the track, and he looked, and he said it looked like to him that that train had just gone over the very track that he was lying on. But he said that was impossible, because he wouldn't be alive if that train had run over him. He didn't understand, but he realized that God was with him. So he started thinking about what God expected of him as a Christian man, as a husband, as a father. And he said, right there, right next to those tracks, he got on his knees and he asked the Lord to forgive him for all of his sins, for all of the times that he had messed up in so many ways, to forgive him. And he felt a wonderful peace that God heard his prayer and had answered his prayer, and that he was still alive. He knew what he needed to do. He needed to get back home as quickly as he could. And here he was, 300, 400, 500 miles away, and he didn't know how he was going to do it, but he needed to get home. So he remembered going to a telephone booth and calling his wife. He said her name, and she said, "What do you want?" He said, "I'm so sorry. I've messed up so badly, and I want to come home." And she said, "No way. You've told me before that you're going to be better, and you never are." He said, "Yeah, but I've never asked the Lord to help me before. Please, please, let me come back home." And she said, "Okay, but if you're not home by dark this Friday, I don't ever want to see your face again. Don't come and see our children. I don't ever want to see you again." And when he said that, I remembered glancing down at my watch. It was only maybe an hour and a half before it was going to be dark. And he needed to get all the way to Dallas. It was afternoon traffic, and it just seemed like an impossibility, but I understood why God had me pick him up. It was a divine appointment. Well, we drove and we talked, and he mostly sat silent. I could tell that he was praying. I could tell that he was trying to figure out what was going to happen. And I also remember that I needed to be somewhere there in Arlington, and I was almost late. And I thought to myself, well, I could do my best to drive him to Dallas, but then I thought, well, I've got to get to this place that I'm supposed to be, that people are counting on me to be there. And I told him, and I said, wow, I said, I'd love to be able to drive you to your home in Dallas. I said, but I can't. And I said, you're going to be like maybe 25 miles, and you've only got about an hour and a half. And I remember he looked at my face, and he said, "It's okay, brother." He said, "God will make a way." And I thought to myself, nobody's going to pick this guy up. He's dirty. He's smelly. He looks scary. He's really big. He looks like a bum on a street. Nobody's going to pick him up. And I just wrestled with that and wrestled with that. And he looked over at me and gave me a big smile of assurance and said, "It's okay. It's okay. It will be okay." And I remember we got to the spot where I had to turn off to go to my home. And we pulled off the side of the road, and I looked one more time, and I was like, oh, I need to keep driving this guy. And he looked at me and he said, "This is God's work. This is God's business. And if God wants me to get home before dark, I will." And he got out of that car. This big man got out of that car, and I drove off. And as I drove off, I'm thinking to myself, nobody's going to pick this guy up. And I made up my mind I was going to go up the street, and I was going to loop around and come back and pick him up, no matter what. So I drove down and looped back around and came to pick him up, and guess what? Someone had stopped, and he was getting into their car. And as he drove off, he saw me in my car, and he just put his finger up into the air as if to say, I'm at the will of the Lord. This is God's business. I've never forgotten that story. never forgotten that small voice that I heard in my head. That voice of the Lord saying, go around, turn around, pick up the hitchhiker. I'm so glad that I did. I'm so glad that I, didn't just follow what I had been told by everyone, don't pick up hitchhikers, but instead I followed God's voice. One last thought. Is God speaking to you about something? Is He speaking to you about something? You need to listen to God's small voice and ask Him to lead you in all you do. And you know what I pray for? I pray that today you will have your own divine appointment. I'm Jerry Stewart. God bless you. See you next time. Bye-bye.